understand the future course of action in the play Macbeth, scene 4 of the first act is very important, as this is the scene that hastens the action with the announcement made by Duncan of making his elder son Malcolm the crown prince. Good morning and welcome back once again to English with Passion and Purpose. Today I am here with the fourth scene of the first act. Be there with me through the entire video in order to understand the scene properly, which is very important for you to understand the course of action later on in the play. I will take you through the lines meticulously, expose the meanings and also highlight all the figures of speech and the things necessary for analyzing the speeches in this particular scene. Duncan has been shown as a gullible, innocent and generous king. To a certain extent, meek and humble. Whereas Macbeth once again has been shown as a man with a vaulting ambition, though he pretends to be loyal and dutiful before the King Duncan. Let us begin the fourth scene, which takes us to Forres, the castle of Duncan. Earlier we had seen that Duncan had already ordered the execution of the Thane of Cawdor, and this scene begins with his inquiring whether the execution had been carried out or not. Malcolm, his elder son, informs him that he was not very much aware because the people who had been in charge of the execution had not returned yet. But he had a talk with someone who had witnessed it, which tells us that Cawdor had already been executed. Malcolm tells his father, "My liege, they are not yet come back, but I have spoke with one that saw him die. My liege, my lord." Now we have to understand that this is a court scene in which formality needs to be maintained. So Malcolm cannot address his father as father or dad or anything of that sort. And he tells him that he had a talk with someone who had seen Cawdor die, who did report that very frankly he confessed his treasons, implored your Highness's pardon and set forth a deep repentance. He had informed three things: that the Thane of Cawdor at the time of his death had admitted his treachery, had sought the forgiveness of the king, and had also expressed a deep remorse, a deep repentance for what he had done. Nothing in his life became him like the leaving it. He died as one that had been studied in his death, to throw away the dearest thing he owed, as it were a careless trifle. This was also informed by the eyewitness that throughout his life, Cawdor had never done anything that suited him, that made him noble more than his death. Because when he died as someone who had already practiced in the art of dying, with someone who had rehearsed himself in meeting death. And how did he die? To throw away the dearest thing he owed, as it were a trifle. Now here we find a hidden metaphor of a garment. The garment that we call the muddy vesture of decay, the physical body, was thrown away, was discarded by the Thane of Cawdor as it was something very petty, something insignificant. And here Shakespeare gives a touch of nobility to the rebel. For Cawdor, he had given up his life just as someone gives up the most important and expensive thing in his life, the dearest thing. And how did he live his life? How did he court death? As if his life was something very trivial. Now we will see that Duncan is the first character in this play to recognize that looks can be deceptive. He says, "There's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. He was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust." Now, one of the major themes of this play is deceptive appearances. It runs through the entire course of the play. And consider Lady Macbeth's "look like the flower, but be the serpent under it." Again, that theme of deception. Now, here Duncan says that it is absolutely useless to find a man's character or to find out about a man's character from his appearance, because appearances are often deceptive. And here we find a human side to the king, because he says, "He was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust." He still, even after the treachery Cawdor had committed against him, addresses him as a gentleman. That the Cawdor, the Thane of Cawdor, who died, was a gentleman on whom Duncan had built an absolute trust. Here once again we find a dramatic irony. A dramatic irony in the way Duncan explains how he had been deceived by a person whom he trusted so much, to such an extent. That irony is sealed by Shakespeare. That dramatic irony is sealed by Shakespeare with the entry of Macbeth right after this speech. Enter Macbeth, Banquo, Ross and Angus. Now here, why am I calling it a dramatic irony? Because the Thane of Cawdor was treacherous against Duncan, and the new Thane of Cawdor, we as readers and the audience all know that is also going to prove to be traitorous against Duncan. So the very dignity, this very designation of the Thane of Cawdor proves to be the nemesis of King Duncan of Scotland, which he fails to understand. "O worthiest cousin, the sin of my ingratitude even now was heavy on me." Once again, as soon as Macbeth enters, Duncan uses the superlative adjective to address him. Worthiest cousin. Duncan was a cousin to Macbeth, because we know that Duncan's and Macbeth's mothers were sisters and daughters of King Malcolm III. So in that way, they were cousins, they were kinsmen. So Duncan over here, more than acknowledging Macbeth as a general, as a noble, as the Thane of Cawdor, considers him to be a member of his family. And he goes on to say, that the sin of my ingratitude even now was heavy on me. The dramatic irony over here is intensified because we, the readers, know that Macbeth does not deserve such hyperbolic appreciation from Duncan, as he did not behave like a kinsman or a worthy cousin, as he had been contemplating Duncan's murder. And we know that he can be potentially deceitful to Duncan. Duncan goes on to say, "Thou art so far before that swiftest wing of recompense is slow to overtake thee. That I am so indebted to you that I cannot reward you enough. No matter how much I reward you, it is always going to fall short of your contribution to my kingdom." Duncan over here has been shown as gullible, as gracious, as a grateful person who says that his rewards can never be equal to Macbeth's advanced contribution. He humbly puts himself down in order to elevate Macbeth's merit. Now the words, "the swiftest wing of recompense," this is a metaphor of flight, which is being compared to the compensation or reward. Duncan means to say that no matter how he compensates, it will never be enough for Macbeth. More dramatic irony is here given because the audience knows that Macbeth doesn't deserve to be called the worthiest cousin. "Would thou hadst less deserved that the proportion both of thanks and payment might have been mine. Only I have left to say, more is thy due than more than all can pay." Now Duncan wishes that Macbeth had not contributed so much, so that he would have the satisfaction of being able to have remunerated him, rewarded him enough. All that he had left to say was that he would never actually be able to reward Macbeth enough for what he had done. This humility of Duncan shows that he was truly noble in his character, and he acknowledged contribution from the side of Macbeth. "The service and the loyalty I owe in doing it pays itself." Macbeth's profession of loyalty to Duncan. This ironically illustrates that in spite of being fully aware of his duties, he is soon going to undermine it. So what does he say? That whatever service I do to you, that is my remuneration. My service, my duty towards you is my payment. Your Highness's part is to receive your duties, and your duties are to our duties are to your throne and state, children and servants, which do but what they should by doing everything safe toward your love and honor. We as your nobles, we as your subjects are duty bound to you, your throne, your children, and to the kingdom. And in doing our duty, we find ourselves adequately remunerated, adequately paid, and amply rewarded. Right after this, Duncan shifts his focus towards Banquo and tells him, "Welcome hither. I have begun to plant thee and will labor to make thee full of growing." Here, Duncan's horticultural metaphor illustrates that he intends to support both Macbeth and Banquo in order to enhance their honor and positions. This metaphor of plantation is enhanced by Banquo, who promises, "There if I grow, the harvest is your own," which means that any fruit that his honor bears, the consequences or outcome would be relished and enjoyed by Duncan himself. But at the same time, we find that everywhere, wherever Macbeth's mention is made, Macbeth is always put ahead of Banquo. In spite of being together through thick and thin, through the battle, Banquo is not given that adequate glory and magnificence that he deserves like Macbeth. In this aspect, we may say that Banquo serves as a foil to Macbeth. Duncan. My plenteous joys, wanton in fullness, hide to seek themselves in drops of sorrow. Duncan is so overwhelmed with joy that his eyes are welled up with tears, and he addresses everyone around, sons, kinsmen, thanes, and you whose places are the nearest, know we will establish our estate upon our eldest Malcolm, whom we name hereafter the Prince of Cumberland. It is at this juncture that a sudden twist comes into the scene. Duncan addresses everyone around, his two sons, all his kinsmen, family members, the nobles who are present, and keeping them a witness, he makes an announcement that his elder son Malcolm would henceforth be called the Prince of Cumberland, just like in modern days the Prince of Wales, who is called the person who is called the Prince of Wales ascends the throne and becomes the king. It was evident that Malcolm would ascend the throne of Scotland after Duncan. This is supposed to be a turning point, a stumbling point for Macbeth. Before I proceed any further, I would like to draw your notice to the fact that in the time of Shakespeare, ascension to the throne was hereditary. For example, a king's son would always become the king after his father's demise. But in the time of Macbeth, it was not so. It was not an automatic or hereditary ascension. The king himself had the authority and the power to nominate the heir to the throne after him. Now, let us recall what Macbeth had said earlier, that if fate would have me king, why then fate would crown me without my stirring. He had depended and invested a lot of hope that Duncan probably would name him the next to be the heir to the throne after him. Now, that idea, that expectation was thwarted when Duncan makes this announcement. But at the same time, Duncan also says, which honor must not unaccompanied invest him only, but signs of nobleness like stars shall shine on all deservers. And not only Malcolm did he want to invest with the title of the Prince of Cumberland, but every other noble who deserved any kind of reward was going to be rewarded adequately by Duncan. He uses the simile of stars to convey his largesse, that the rewards were not confined only to his family members like Malcolm or Macbeth, who was his cousin, but to all other deservers. Here, let us notice the sibilance that is used in order to point out the overwhelming rewards, overwhelming universality of the rewards of Duncan. What is the sibilance here? Like stars shall shine on all deservers. Signs of nobleness shall shine like stars on all deservers. A continuous S sound that potentially complements Duncan's rewards. Then he makes another announcement. From hence to Inverness and bind us further to you. Duncan announces that he intended to go to Inverness, Macbeth's castle, right after this. And he says that he wanted it to bind himself further to you. That is, in order to enhance the familial ties with Macbeth, he wanted to make a visit to Macbeth's castle. Macbeth. The rest is labour which is not used for you. Macbeth once again very humbly tells the king that the time that is not spent in the king's service is supposed to be restless for him. And if he takes rest at that time, that is more laborious than serving the king. I'll myself be the harbinger and make joyful the hearing of my wife with your approach. So humbly take my leave. Harbinger is a messenger, and Macbeth over here now volunteers to be the messenger to his wife, to give the good news of Duncan's arrival to his castle. My worthy Cawdor. Once again, Duncan addresses Macbeth as a worthy thane of Cawdor. Once again, we find a dramatic irony, given that right after this, whatever Macbeth is going to speak in an aside is going to prove absolutely different from Duncan's idea of him. Macbeth's aside. Prince of Cumberland, that is a step on which I must fall down, or else o'erleap, for in my way it lies. Immediately, Macbeth recognizes Malcolm as a potential obstacle and threat that lies on his way to monarchy, to sovereignty. The existence of Malcolm is going to thwart his ambition for the throne. So he calls it an obstacle, a step, an obstacle which either he will have to jump over or stumble and fall down on. This is a metaphor that he uses in order to show that it was like a hurdle that he had to jump over, or he had to overcome, or he would fall down and forget about monarchy altogether. For in my way it lies. Stars, hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires. The eye wink at the hand, yet let that be which the eye fears when it is done to see. Macbeth talks in rhyming couplets, which makes this aside all the more poignant in its emotion. He once again uses the same metaphor of stars, the star imagery that Duncan had used in a positive way. Macbeth transforms it into something that is to be feared. He uses a metaphor to reveal his capacity for deception, owing to the fact that Duncan had not appointed him as a successor. He did not want light to expose his traitorous desires. What kind of desires did he have in his heart? Satanic desires. Desires that were black and deep. Why satanic? Because it was almost like the fall of Satan from the grace of God by going against him right after God had nominated his son as the King of Heavens. Now, Macbeth exposes a desire for self-deception also. Why? The eye wink at the hand. The eye is supposed to be a witness that approves of our actions, and the hand is supposed to be that agent that conducts the actions. Now he wishes to murder the king, but not witness the act. This is the desire for self-deception. He has the idea of regicide, but is not willing to witness it himself. So the metaphorical use of the eye winking at the hand. He wants his eyes to be blind to the actions that are committed by his hands. Yet, let that be which the eye fears when it is done to see. But in reality, he doesn't actually care how horrifying that action is. Because he says, though I want my eye not to witness the action of my hand, but I don't care how horrible that deed is when it is done, when it is already committed. So this is what we call self-deception. Finally, even more irony has been used. Now, while Macbeth is involved in this aside, Banquo and Duncan had been praising Macbeth. Because Duncan says, "True, worthy Banquo, he is full so valiant, and in his commendations I am fed." So Banquo, truly worthy Banquo, you're absolutely right about Macbeth, that he is a valiant gentleman and his appreciation is like a banquet for me. I feed on it. Again, a metaphor. I relish, I enjoy the appreciations of Macbeth. Let's after him, whose care is gone before, to bid us welcome. It is a peerless gentleman. Now, the scene ends with Duncan calling Macbeth an unparalleled kinsman or family member. Macbeth is unparalleled as far as his valiance, as far as his prowess is concerned. But at the same time, he will prove himself to be peerless in deception. And Duncan will never be able to acknowledge that this title of the Thane of Cawdor is going to bring about his death and downfall altogether. So once again, a very, very hideous treason that will be committed by Macbeth that we know of is highlighted through the dramatic irony in Duncan's calling him a peerless kinsman. With that, we come to the end of scene 4. Now, before leaving, I would want you to understand that this particular scene hinges on two major incidents. Number one, the nomination of Malcolm as the Prince of Cumberland and the forthcoming King of Scotland. And number two, Duncan's intention of going to Inverness, Macbeth's castle. The first one was going to have its repercussions on Macbeth, who would turn into truly a deceptive person and take the life of Duncan. The second one, Duncan's decision to go to Inverness, actually seals his destiny of being killed by both the peerless kinsman assisted by his wife. Thank you so much for being with me throughout. So long for today. Stay tuned and stay subscribed. I will soon be back with the most important expository scene, scene 5, which is going to take us further into the action and expose the character and dynamics of the relationship between Macbeth and his wife, Lady Macbeth. Goodbye.